honored guests, friends, fellow thinkers, and many old friends who have been working together in the past few years. We're meeting today. Allow me to express my appreciations. Thank you very much for having me in this conference of a community that is of not my department when I did my undergraduate. I was trained as an economist. I did my graduate programs in public policies and political science, and had the opportunity to work with many architects. So I'm truly honored. It is indeed a pleasure to join all of you. And this is a place where architecture is not only discussed. I believe this is a place where architecture is also being questioned and challenged and perhaps reimagined. So allow me to say that even though in the introduction which I was mentioned as former governor, but I'm here not as a former governor, but as someone who deeply believes that cities are living tanks and that architects help us in reading and in writing them so that we can have a city that we can provide rooms for dialogues. I come to speak about a different way of imagining our cities, not just as physical settlements, but as civic performances, as it was mentioned earlier about the topics. But before I go further, allow me to reflect a moment about some of the principles that I deeply believe in. It is a principle of social justice and equality, driven from the 5 principles of Pancasila. The 5th principle, which is the most fundamental promise of Indonesians' independence, is social justice and equality, and it is the guiding star of our Pancasila. This ideology, this approach, these values has shaped every roles and every decisions I've taken throughout my career. And I'm outlining this at the beginning because I'm not speaking again as a former governor, but as someone who cares about the future of urban cities. When I served as rector of Paramadina University, I realized that beyond the campus, behind Jakarta's grand avenues, there are neighborhoods who are struggling with poverty. It's hard to accept that a place of learning would exist in an isolation from its surrounding. So we created a scholarship program specifically for children of our neighbors. We have no constitutional duty to do that. We were a private university. But with that, high school graduates in our neighbors able to go to our university at no cost. So we do hope that university could also become space for social repair. And then we look at the archipelago of Indonesia. Let's think beyond the city. It's about the deep gaps across our nations, the distance between urban centers and remote villages is not just spatial. The difference is it's about distance of opportunity. That's why we initiated a project called Indonesia Mengajar. It's a movement to send the nation's brightest university graduates to the remote area, to the most remote area of Indonesia. So sending a graduate of aeronautics from ITB to Kapuas Hulu. Let me give you illustrations going to Kapuas Hulu. 1 hour flight from Jakarta to Pontianak, 26 hours by bus to Kapuas Hulu, 5 hours by boat, and then another hour by motorcycles to reach the village. So you can go to London back and forth, and you're not there yet. Just to give you illustrations. Why that is the case? We want to ensure that we are part of those who want to make sure that the gap of opportunity can be narrowed. So I continued responsibility. I serve as Minister of Education, and again, we launched a project called Guru Garis Depan, a civil service initiative that places permanent, well-supported teachers in the frontiers, in the outmost and the most disadvantaged regions in our archipelago. These teachers were not designed simply to teach, simply for being an educator, but they are designed to be community leaders in the long run, anchoring the presence of the states where it had long been struggling to fulfill. So, when I was entrusted to serve as governor in Jakarta, I brought the same compass with me, which is social justice, both as directions and also as destination. I'll speak more in a moment about how we tried to apply this principle through the tools of architectures and urban design. But let me first offer some context to many of you who may not be familiar with Jakarta. Jakarta is one of the most densest cities in the world. It is a home over 11 million people. It has one of the highest level of inequality in Southeast Asia, with a Gini index that hover around 0.4, and nearly half of its workforce is in the informal sectors, and about 1/5 of its residents live in poverty or near poverty. Therefore, any conversations about design in a city like Jakarta must begin with these realities. But on the other hand, Jakarta is also one of the most spatially fragmented cities in the region. Wealth and infrastructures were heavily concentrated in the centers and the south, while the north and west were struggling with chronic underinvestment, especially in housing, drainage, and green space. And when we come about the gap, the top is at par with those in many modern megapolitans across the globe, but those who are below were struggling deeply. So these spatial divides mirror social ones, but they're often reinforced by our design, by our regulations. And access to public services remain uneven. While some enjoy world-class hospitals, world-class schools, many others rely on overstretched public facilities and often located far from their homes. Give you an example. More than 25% of Jakarta's residents live in a neighborhood classified by the UN Habitat Standard as slum-like, and this is 25%. Where basic infrastructures like clean water, proper sanitations, or safe sidewalks are still lacking. So these experiences, how my life journey has been, and how I view this reality of the city, shape myself, seeing the city not simply as technical object. I saw the city of Jakarta as a moral and cultural landscape. A city is not only a place to live, but also a place to belong. And in a country as vast and as diverse as Indonesia, we cannot design cities with only engineering in mind. We must design with imaginations, because our geography demands that imaginations. Now, let me give you the Indonesian context here. When we talk about Indonesia, let's not begin with maps, but let's start with metaphor. Indonesia is indeed an archipelago, but not only in terms of its geography, but it is also an archipelago in terms of imaginations. Our cities are shaped not by linear logic, but by tides, ritual, oral traditions, and islands of memory. And therefore, urban design in such a place cannot follow one-size-fits-all approach. It must be humble enough to listen and bold enough to express. So today, in these great opportunities, I'd like to offer a provocations. One that may sound philosophical, but actually it is deeply practical. What if we treated cities not merely as space to occupy, but as stage to perform who we are? What if we look at cities in a different way? What if sidewalks, parks, and transit system could speak, could express values like justice, equality, belongings? Can you imagine what would it means to design for that performance, where all the facilities were expressing those values? You know, we often talk about smart cities, green cities, sustainable cities, livable cities, but rarely we talk about cities that speaks. Cities that move not just bodies, but move souls. Cities that allow disagreement. Cities that provide celebrations and allow silence to coexist in their public spaces. That's the spirit of what I'd like to share with you today, the idea of performative archipelago. Now, why this matters a lot. Indonesia is not a single landmass. It is a constellation of island, culture, and rhythm of life. And each island has its own tempo, it has its own stories, and its own way of relating to space. In this archipelago, the idea of urban cannot be copied and pasted from a continental model. Our geography demands a different imagination. Each city in Indonesia is more than just a cluster of buildings. Each city is a stage, shaped by climate, shaped by history, shaped by rituals. Therefore, a city by the sea breathes differently than a city in the mountains. A marketplace in Sumatra may carry different social codes than a plaza in Sulawesi. So urbanism here must be rooted in the locals and not imposed from the top. Yet, too often, urban planning in Indonesia follows templates designed elsewhere. We build malls, highways, mega projects that may work in other contexts but feel alien here. As a result, many of our cities grow outward but lose its souls. They become disconnected, not just from each other, but from the people they're meant to serve. Public life, which should invite life, often become controlled, fenced, and forgotten. It's public space. Instead of enabling gathering, expressions, or contemplations, many urban public spaces become either hostile or hollow. When that happens, a city becomes quiet. There's two kind of quiet. Quiet because it's peaceful, or quiet because it is disengaged. What worrisome is most of the hollow and quiet because it is disengaged. And therefore we lose the chance to be moved by our own surroundings. However, given this diversity, this complexity, allow me to say that Indonesian complexity is not a challenge to be simplified. I'm not here to say that we need to simplify this. No, it is a richness to be embraced, and our diversity should be seen not as noise to reduce, but as music to orchestrate. Cities then should not be designed to standardize identity, but to host differences, and this requires a shift from mechanical urbanisms into performative urbanism. We need a new urban logic, one that fits the soul of an archipelago. Not just roads and regulations, but rituals and relationships. A logic where cities are not just built, but performed on daily basis. And performed by who? By the people who live in them. And this is the spirit of performative archipelago. But allow me to underline here that performative archipelago is not a master plan, but it is a mindset. It is a way of designing cities as living stage for public life, rather than just mechanical containers for zoning and movement. It asks us to see the city not just built form, but as social performance. It starts from the belief that space is never neutral.
Luar biasa sekali teman-teman bagaimana pidato Anies Baswedan di forum arsitek nasional, internasional ya. Luar biasa sekali bagaimana pidato Mas Anies Baswedan teman-teman. Kita tahu bahwa Pak Anies sekarang bukanlah pejabat publik, bukanlah ada jabatan di pemerintahan ya. Namun beliau selalu ya, berkarya di luar pemerintahan ya, di luar dinas teman-teman ya. Namun ya, yang tidak kalah lagi adalah Pak Anies ini selalu berbicara di forum internasional ya. Kalau kita tahu bahwa internasional ini tidak kaleng-kaleng, membutuhkan orang yang sangat cerdas, sangat pintar ya, seperti Pak Anies Baswedan. Bagaimana menurut kalian?